Welcome back to Kickin It With Kunkel, and as we always do, we got a great one for you this week. He sat down with the general manager, Dana Brown of your Houston Astros, but before we get there, I want to touch on the Texans. Training camp underway. The team looks good. The offense looks lethal. It's all about staying healthy, as it always is in the NFL. But having said that, this is as deep of a team as the Texans have had in a really long time. Now, defensively, I'm still worried about that cornerback 2 spot. Is it going to be the rookie Kamari Lassiter, Jeff Okudah, or C.J. Henderson alongside or opposite side of Derek Stingley? And can Derek stay healthy? So those are the two big questions. I love the little scrum that they had last week. I think it was fun. It was good for the team. It builds camaraderie as long as it doesn't tear it apart, and I don't see that happening with the leadership that they have. And for those of you that don't know what happened, I'll recap it for you very quickly. Stephon Diggs got kind of laid out over the middle by safety Jimmy Ward, and everybody says Jimmy Ward has only one speed. You can't do that. It's unacceptable. You don't hit your teammate like that in training camp. He's not expecting it, and that's when injuries are happening. It didn't happen this time, thank goodness. So obviously some guys took exception to Jimmy Ward hitting Stephon Diggs, namely Dalton Schultz. So Schultz came over, had words for Jimmy Ward, and then Derek Stingley had issues with Dalton Schultz having an issue with Jimmy Ward. So then he gave him one of those like strong shoves, like a two-handed jab shove that knocked Schultz to the ground. And the two teams got after him, offense, defense. These were starters. This was not some rookie trying to prove himself doing something stupid. This were some starters doing some things that I wouldn't say stupid, but what Jimmy Ward did, you can't do that in training camp. You can't have a guy go to the ground when you're just doing thud. You're not going full contact, and if he's not expecting that hit, that's when injuries happen. Okay, let's get to the Astros, because that's what this week's episode is all about with General Manager Dana Brown. And whether you're watching on Fox Local or YouTube, we appreciate you. Thank you. Like, click, subscribe, the whole 9 yards to the Fox 26 Houston YouTube page as well. All right. Who is this team? Is this the team that started 9-19? Is this the team that was the hottest team throughout all of baseball in June and then had a decent start to July and now kind of has fallen off again? I think they're somewhere in between. They're not the team that was 9-19 in last place in the AL West, and they're certainly not the best team in all of baseball right now. There are too many holes. And Dana Brown's going to address that. What are they going to do at the trade deadline? What do they want? Should they trade Alex Bregman? I asked him that straight up because he's not under contract for next year. But to my last question, I think they're somewhere in between, of course, right? They're not the best and they're not the worst. They're somewhere in between. They've got to play more consistently. They have not done that. You can't go out to Oakland while you're fighting for a spot in the playoffs and lose 2 or 3 to the Oakland Athletics. They're one of the worst teams in all of baseball. That can't happen. So now they go to the Dodgers this weekend. Tough to expect much after losing 2 or 3. But having said that, if they're up here on one of their peaks before they fall down again, then maybe they can win 2 or 3 before coming home to host the Pirates. And I think we're going to be able to see Paul Skeens in that rotation as well when they're in town. So anyway, what did we talk about with Dana Brown? We talked about Lance McCullers. He's shut down from throwing right now. Do they still expect him back? Spoiler alert, they said yes. You can find out when in just a couple of minutes. And then what's going on? What happened behind the scenes with Jose Abreu, truly? And then also, what's going on with Kyle Tucker behind the scenes as well? Because he was supposed to miss maybe 1 game, maybe a day. Certainly wasn't supposed to go on the IL. Well, now he hasn't played in 2 months. What's going to happen at the trade deadline? Should they trade Alex Bregman? All those questions are answered by your general manager, Dana Brown, right here on Kickin' It With Kunkel.
Let's start with what everyone's talking about. Trade deadline, July 30th. What are your biggest needs? Who have you talked to? What are those conversations like right now?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking to multiple GMs right now. Of course, we're looking for pitching. Excuse me. As I've been saying, we're deep into our depth in terms of our starting pitching, so we need to see if we can add to that. But we're talking to multiple clubs.
Can you shine a light on who you're talking to and who you like a lot?
No, we can't do that. I mean, that would be out of the ordinary. So we got to keep that hush. This is part of what happens during the trade deadline. But make no mistake, we are looking for a starter.
What about on the offensive side of the ball? Anything there pique your interest?
No, I mean, offensively, I think we're going to be okay. If we get a chance to maybe add another bat, that would be nice, but that's not as much of a priority. Can't wait till we get Tucker back. That's going to be a great addition. We've been playing well without him. Don't know how sustainable that is, but ultimately, we're going to need Tucker back. And so when we get him back, that's going to be like acquiring a trade.
I mean, it's crazy what you do without Kyle Tucker, right? Like you're 10 games back on June 18th, and now you're in first place. You don't have Kyle Tucker the whole time, maybe your best player of the season. Take me behind the scenes of what happened with Kyle, because at one point it was he'll miss maybe a day, won't go on IL, and now here we are 2 months later, and you can't predict what's going to happen, but how does it unfold?
Yeah, the deep bone bruise is definitely unpredictable. He really fouled that ball off of the top part of his shin where there was no protection. And a big part of it was very swollen. It was, the swelling was so much that it was very difficult to get a good read on it. And so basically the best read you're going to get is the reaction you get from the player. And he was in pain. And so he was, struggling to walk. And so as the pain started to go down, he started to be able to move a little bit more, but it's still pretty sore, and it's just so deep of a bruise that it's taken so long. And then, there was a lot of swelling for a long time. And, if you know anything about Kyle Tucker, you know how he really uses his lower half with so much torque, particularly in that swing that he has. And so, he really needs to be 100% healthy before he can get back. And so, ultimately, I think he's doing some baseball activities right now. He's taking some swings in the cages, a small baseball activity on the field. Hopefully we'll get him back here. We don't have a timeline because it's really based on how he's feeling. But everything seems to be healing properly. The swelling has gone down, and we just hope to get him back.
What's the latest on Justin Verlander?
Yeah, Verlander's throwing sides now, which is good, without any issues and no pain. He's up to I think it's 45 to 50 pitches, which is pretty good for him. And, he's topping 90, 91. That's got the makings of a comeback. So ultimately he's throwing sides, he's throwing a lot of pitches, and there's no pain or there's no issues. So those are good things.
How have you been able to or tried to handle the Lance McCullers rehab? He and I talked early on in the show, actually he was on the inaugural one, about how it's just there's nothing he can control at this point. It's about how his arm responds. Is that kind of what you see? What's this been like trying to get him back on the bump?
Yeah, it's been difficult. The guy's been grinding real hard. He's a true professional, and he's done a lot in this organization. And, it's really difficult from my position to see him go through this, because as an ex-player myself, I know how tough it is when you have an injury, and now he had an injury, felt like, we got the surgery, I feel like it's healing, and then you have a setback. And so those things are really difficult. And I really commend his work ethic and all the time that he's putting in, but hopefully he'll get better here soon. But the setbacks are real when it comes to the elbow and the flexor tendon, and it's just a difficult thing. And so hopefully, we'll get him to come back. But I know he's grinding. It's not an issue that he's not working. He's working, he's running, he's doing all the things that he needs to do. But one of the issues is just that this is one of those injuries that's really difficult.
Is he throwing again? Or
no,
is he still shut down?
He's still shut down.
Done for the year?
Not done for the year, but he's still shut down until he can get rid of the discomfort. And once he gets rid of that, we'll start him back throwing again. And I think this is one of those things where you're starting to fight your way back. You start the throwing, you increase the throwing, and it starts to bark again. And so I just think this is part of the progression of coming back from an injury. But ultimately, I think at some point he'll be able to throw with no pain. We can get him stretched out a little further, and then maybe we'll see him, sometime in late August or early September is our hope. But it's tough to put a timeline on it right now because he's not throwing. So once he begins to throw and we get him stretched out, we'll probably be able to give a timeline. This is just a hope that we can get him back, sometimes in August.
I think the biggest question I get when I'm out in the public is everyone asks me, what's going to happen with Alex Bregman? I'm like, well, first of all, I have no idea. And so how do you weigh, is he available on the trade block? Like, do you want to get something back for him, / if you don't re-sign him, you just lose him to free agency, or do you re-sign him right now? Like, how does that all work out and how is it going?
Yeah, we have no interest in trading Bregman at all. I think Bregman is too much of an impact player, too much of an impact in the clubhouse. So we haven't had any trade talks about trading Bregman. I mean, so we will have some type of discussion at some point, this season or the end of the season as it closes out, as far as him returning here. We definitely owe him that. We'll put something together, a package or whatever we decide to do. We're not in talks right now, so we're just letting the season play out right now. But at some point, we will have some conversation, and we're definitely not trading him. I mean, we need him here to get back to the postseason.
Take me behind the scenes of the Jose Abreu situation, because I don't know that it hurt anyone more than it hurt him. The way it went through, and talking with Joe Espada behind the scenes, it was a struggle for him to have to deal with and watch. Like, what was it like trying to figure that situation out?
Yeah, first of all, it's you have to think about the human being. We sometimes forget that this is a sport played by human beings, and ultimately this guy is a good human being and a good guy, and he's been a good player for a long time. And so when a player starts to struggle toward the end of his career, you try to get creative and see if you can get him back to what he used to do well. And so when he struggled this year, we tried to sit him out, and he accepted, and he went down to West Palm, and he worked hard, and he tried to get the swing back, he tried to get the timing back, and ultimately we felt he was starting to get a little bit better, and so we brought him back, and he was still struggling. So it was one of those things where nobody bats 1,000 when it comes to these contracts and these signings. And when you sign guys, you hope that they work. You hope that these guys get to the end of their deal. It just doesn't work out that way. It's not realistic. You try to make as least amount of mistakes as you could, but ultimately, he couldn't get back. He couldn't get his timing back. And with the team struggling, we had to make a choice. Like, look, we need to get somebody else. We need to give somebody else a runway here at first base, see if they could take off. And so we were very fortunate that Singleton was here. He got a little bit of a runway, and he's been playing very well.
There were 3 turnarounds to this season that I think really allowed you guys to get back to first place. And I highlighted them the other night. It was Alex Bregman, because he had a really slow start. Hunter Brown, of course, and then the first base position. Talk about Hunter Brown, because I don't know that he was able to stay in a rotation, I was saying, in any other club without some of the injuries. And then here we are. He strings together 8 quality starts, and he's one of the best pitchers you guys have on the roster right now, and wouldn't be in first place without him. Just what he's done to get to where he is compared to how he started.
Yeah, I mean, Hunter Brown's, it's one of those deals where you're very happy for him, because first of all, how hard he was working. How successful he's been in the past, and it was just a matter of time for him to turn a corner. And so adding that two-seamer where he was starting to get the ball to go in toward righties a little bit, that really helped back the righties off the plate. It gave the righties a different look. They thought the ball was starting off on the inner half of the plate, and by the time they swung, the ball would like fade in. And so that was a big part. And that kept them off of his fastball that takes off. And so you take that fastball that's running in with the fastball that's taken off to the top of the zone and a hard breaking ball and the cutter. Now you got a repertoire that really started to get the major league hitters out. And I think it was a matter of Bregman saying, hey, you may need to get something that's going to ride into the right-hand hitter. That's a teammate coming over saying, look, speaking from experience as a hitter, you might want to try this. And I think it worked out. And that's the beauty of having teammates. That's the beauty of having a coaching staff. You start to talk about different things. You help one another out. You pick each other up. All of a sudden, you make that little attempt to try it. It works. And now he's, like you said, he's 8 starts in, and he's been really good. And we're gonna need him. He stepped up right at the right time when the rotation was kind of like really on fumes, and he really gave us a fill up. So we've been pretty solid and steady since then, and hopefully we can continue that.
What have you seen in Joe Espada in his first year? Because fans were all over him to start, and my view was that the buttons he pushed, the players on the other end didn't respond the way that they should have when they went in, whether it was the back end of the bullpen or Bregman or whoever was with the slow start. How have you seen him learn, adapt, and grow as a manager in his first year? Yeah, I mean, part of the thing is we all wanted the microwave version, right? We want it quick, we want it to be done. And so ultimately, Joe's first-time manager, I felt really good that he was going to be able to turn it around. And this was one of the reasons why I chose Joe, because he was very familiar with the team. There's no panic on this team. And I think when the players saw him, stay calm and stay the course, I think that really helped them to turn around, because he didn't panic when some of the players were struggling. He kept being, the Joe positive guy. And so ultimately, I think that really helped out the club. His leadership to stay the course, to not panic,
to not yell at players, to not start freaking out and, questioning players or anything like that. He just said, look, you're a good team. You guys are going to turn it around. He stayed positive. He gave encouragement. And so ultimately, I give him a lot of credit for this turnaround. And that's one of the reasons why I liked him, because I knew he was familiar with the players, and I knew he could handle the players that were in the locker room, that he had been a big part of the success here. And so ultimately, I give him a lot of credit for this turnaround.
I'm curious about your career. You've been in the game for a long time. How have you seen your job? I know you haven't been a general manager the entire time, but just how you gotta go about the daily business and picking players and going about the job. How's it changed over the years? Because baseball has so much gotten into analytics, and it's gotten away from kind of that gut and to the binders. And just how's it changed for you?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's my love for the game, right? It's what I do. I've loved the game ever since I was a kid, ever since I played Little League. And so that's where it really starts. You have to have a love for the game. And just my career path, been a player, been a coach in the minor leagues, was an area scout, was a cross-checker, ended up becoming a scouting director. And then ultimately that got me into the front office, and I started to learn a lot, and I started to embrace the things that make clubs successful. I came up from an evaluation standpoint in scouting, and so it was all about evaluating the player, giving you a gut feel, breaking down the makeup. And then all of a sudden we start to learn a lot more about the information, the data. Why doesn't some of these evaluations that I'm making make sense? And so when you start reading the data and the information and you put all that together, I think that's a better way of trying to identify what players are going to be. And so ultimately I brought that, same vision into this organization, which they already had a major vision on the data stuff. And so I look at it as you have to be really good at evaluating players. You have to be really good at evaluating makeup, and you have to understand the data and the information. And if you could put those things together, I think you got a way better chance at identifying what players you should take a chance on, what players you should select, and those things are very important. And I would never get away from old school scouting, reading the makeup, and now pulling the data and the information and putting it all together. I think weighing the evidence in that way can cause you to make way better decisions.
What's something you tell your scouts that they need to do, like on a day that it rains in the minor leagues, like to not waste that day? What's something that they need to be doing to learn about a player in your mind?
Yeah, the scouts?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, our scouts really don't scout the minor leagues. We do have like some of our special advisors going around seeing the minor leagues, but when our scouts that go out and scout more on the amateur side, when those guys are going out, we encourage them to pick up the phone. We encourage them to call coaches. We encourage them, to talk to the guys, the agents. We encourage them to try to do some digging on the makeup, so that you don't lose a day, because ultimately getting back to how you weigh in the data and the information, the scouting and the makeup. The makeup is probably the biggest part of it. I think most of our misses in this game is when we miss on the person. And so ultimately you got to know who you're buying into, because you have to buy into people in order to get the people right. And so it's just like sitting down, having an interview, and you start talking to a guy and you want to hire him, you get a real good feel for that person. I think baseball is very similar. You buy into people, and before you go giving this guy an extension or doing that, I think you might want to get the makeup right.
Tell me a little bit about Bryce Matthews, what you've seen.
Yeah, so Bryce was a guy that, we were very fortunate to get in the draft. First of all, because he can play an infield position. And second of all, is he's got power. And that was the biggest thing that attracted us to him, was the fact that he could play on the dirt and he had power. And we knew that we would get him to do a few things in terms of getting to that power. And now we're starting to see some of the fruit of his labor. Because he's starting to get to some of the power. He's hitting the ball pretty hard. He's got pretty good exit velocities. And we feel like, look, this guy can really have a good run here. He's a local kid. He went through our program, in the inner city with our foundation. And so ultimately we think he could be really good and be a good piece in this city.
Got another one for you.
Yeah.
Emotionally watching the games when you're 10 games out versus watching it now when you're in first place. How's it different for you? Do you have less panic in your heart while you're watching and stress?
No, I'm one of those guys that I'm the same guy every day, when I'm watching a game, I get frustrated, when we don't do certain things, right? And, I'm I'm like that if we're 10 games up or, 5 games back. I'm just one of those guys. Let's do all the little things right. Let's continue to grind, because the minute you take your foot off the gas, that's when other teams start to catch up. So I'm the same way every day. I'm like always pressing, always wanting to do well, always wanting to get the little things right. Because ultimately, when you get all those little things right, the team's going to be better, the team's going to play better.
I hope you guys really enjoyed that conversation. Shout out to Dana, and thank you very much for taking the time to sit down with me while the guys are on the road. A lot of questions to be answered in the coming days. Let me know what you guys think that the Astros should do in the comments below, especially if you're watching on YouTube. I'd love to have a little bit of a back and forth about what's possible, what's realistic going forward for this team. Are they a playoff team? Are they going to win the AL West? Because I don't think they get in by winning the wild card. There's too many teams around there that they got to beat out. In the AL West, all they got to do is be better than the Mariners. So at the halfway point, I pointed out on Fox 26, they had to be 2 games better than the Mariners. They were 1 game back. So 1 game ties them, 1 game gets them ahead, and then they win that division. And this is kind of the beauty of getting in the playoffs by winning your division. The AL West is not a very good division. The slow start hasn't killed the Astros. They're in the position they want to be in regards to a top of the division. But they still have a long way to go, because the goal isn't to win the division. The goal is to get back to the ALCS and then get back to the World Series and bring home another title to Houston. So can they do that? Is that their ceiling? What do you think they should do with Alex Bregman going forward, assuming that they do not trade him like Dana suggested? Next week, I sit down with the Hall of Famer, Andre Johnson, getting inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. We go one-on-one. Wait till you hear some of the things that he had to say about Steve Smith, whether he should be in the Hall of Fame, how Andre responded time in and time again, getting rejected from the Hall of Fame. All of that right here on Kickin' It With Kunkel every Friday on Fox Local and on YouTube, where it lives forever. Appreciate you guys. Thank you.